This is going to be a demonstration in oil pastel. Some of the things you'll need obviously are the oil pastels. Again, I put them in colors from lightest to darkest. I have a palette knife and I also have an X-Acto knife. Sometimes I'm going to want to sharpen these and or remove color. I can remove color with the palette knife. I can also sometimes sharpen the pastels with the palette knife. And obviously the X-Acto knife can be used for sharpening the oil pastels as well. If you do that, hopefully you can see there's some stuff on this palette knife. You should really clean that off when you're finished. So I'm just going to take a tissue because it was close to me, and you can see here I'm wiping off what's on the palette knife. I should put it back the way that well, better than the way that I found it if it's got stuff on it. Similar to a campsite, we always leave campsites the way we found them without any garbage there. So technically I'm going to take this, and one thing that I'll show you, most of the pastels, or the oil pastels I mean, are rounded. I accidentally bought some square ones, but what you'll notice about the oil pastels is the oil pastels are thicker than the chalk pastels. No matter what, they are thicker, and even if it's a square shape, it's thicker than the chalk pastel. You do need to be careful of that because a lot of times you don't want to mix those two types of media, especially when you're a beginning student, because you could make some mistakes. So here I have my drawing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to just move my palette knife and X-Acto knife out of the way. I am going to take this kind of medium pink purple pastel, and oh, I put so much pressure on I just broke it. I'm not going to freak out about that because again, I can use the entire pastel, and I'm just right now I'm just trying to cover an area. It's actually I'm scumbling to create value here. Sometimes when I'm using the chalk pastels I can smudge with my finger, but technically with the oil pastels I'm going to want to blend the oil pastels into each other, and in order to do that I don't want to actually rub. You can rub if you want to, but the pastels work better when you blend them into each other. So again, I'm going to just cover this entire area with this medium pink, and then I'm going to go back into there with some white and some black in order to show the value that is in the hallway here. Technically what I'm also going to do is I can see that the display case is darker on one side than the other, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make some dark into that display case, and when I get on the edges I'm trying to be very, very slow and methodical about where I'm putting the pastel, and I can actually already see I made a little bit of a mistake on the bottom, but I'm not going to freak out about that because technically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the palette knife, and I can go back and I can scrape off the black where I got a little bit too much black in there, and eventually that will completely go away, so I don't need to worry about that at all. I'm then going to take this darker purple and I'm going to mix, ooh, and I can see I've got a little bit too much black in here, so I'm going to scrape some of this black off with my palette knife in order to allow the purple to show up. So I'm going to take some of this off, and what I'm going to show you here when I'm done is you'll actually see there's a bunch of this pastel, and I'll put it somewhere where you can actually see it. A bunch of this pastel on the palette knife, and again I want to clean that off. I don't want that on my drawing because I could technically make another mistake. I can see I have a couple little of extra pilings of the oil pastel here on my paper. I actually want to get those off so I can take my paper, I can probably like tamp it onto the desk, and some of those pieces are going to come over here, and technically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take tissue and wipe that. I'm going to take a tissue and I'm going to wipe that out of the way. Crap. So here I can see I have got a little bit where I scraped away with the palette knife. I have a little bit of a problem there, so I'm actually going to go back in and cover that up a little bit more. I'm pressing a little harder with the pastel, and it's okay that I've got a little bit of this texture from the paper still showing. It's giving it like another dimension, which is kind of nice, and I'm going to again go a little bit slower as I get toward the edges of other places that I want to go to. I'm going to come over to this other side, add a little bit more of this pinky purple that I've got going on here. Then I'm going to go toward the top, try to make that edge a little bit nicer. And once I've got that filled in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this white. I know that my light source is coming over from the left-hand side, so I'm actually going to take this white and I'm going to combine the white with the purple. And this is what I meant by the pastels actually blend much nicer when you use them into each other. So I'm going to actually continue to use this white in here, and I'm going horizontal for the most part on this surface so that I can show a difference when I go to the next part of my drawing. I'm actually going to put a little bit more of this white over on the side there. Then I'm going to switch to a darker purple, and I'm going to use a darker purple on the right hand side so that you can again see that it's getting darker from one part to another. And I can see already I'm going to have to put a little bit more, go back with that pinky purple because I'm going to have to put more in the middle. I've got too much of a stark contrast going on right here. I'm going to have to actually go back and I'm going to have to make that a little bit more of a smoother transition. So I'm going to try to put a little bit of the purple in here. Oh, and I can see I already made a little bit of a mistake there, but I will go back and fix that in a moment. I'm going to continue to use the purple that I have. Another thing that I can do as I'm using the pastels is I could actually move my paper around in order to make it easier for myself to draw. I'm going to turn it so that the surface I'm trying to get at is closer to my hand. So as I'm doing that, you can see it's getting more and more solidly filled in. I'm going to then go back with that original medium color that I started to use, and I'm going to go, again, I'm mostly horizontal as I'm drawing with this pinky purple. I did go a little bit onto the ceiling just there, but I'm going to cover that back up with another color later, so again, I'm not going to freak out about that at all. Then as I'm going, I want to get this edge a little bit nicer so that I can see that that square of the display case looks really nice. I'm then going to go back in here with the black, and I'm going to put even a little bit of the black into this wall because I can see on my wall that the wall is much darker than the ceiling, and it's also much darker than the walls. So I'm going to put this back wall first of all horizontal as I'm drawing, and I'm actually going to go multiple directions as I'm scumbling because it's actually going to make the drawing look a little bit nicer. I want to make sure that I keep a little bit of this pinky purple on the edge so that I can see a difference or enough contrast between the display board at the end of the hallway and where that wall is. And I'm actually going to want to go in here and I want to get a pretty good corner going on in there. I do need to be careful as I'm doing this, and any kind of mistake that I make, I might want to go back in with my palette knife and fix that, and I will do that in just a little bit. But I'm going to take this black, I'm going to bring it over a little bit farther, and then I'm actually going to take the purple that I was using before, and I'm going to put the purple, and I might even use some blue violet into this so that this display case has enough contrast from the rest of the background. And I can already tell the purple doesn't want to go over the top of the black, so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up scraping some of that black off with a palette knife in order to make that have the contrast that it needs to. So I'm filling this in as much as I can there, and then I'm going to go back in here, and actually it's not even too bad just the way it is. Maybe what I think I'm going to do though is I'm going to take a little bit more of this black and I'm going to try to make it even darker right along this top edge, and I'm going to let it be thicker and I'm going to get it thinner as it goes down. You can kind of see how it's really skinny here and it's a little bit thicker as it goes towards the bottom, and I'm even going to like trail that out so that it makes this natural looking edge. And I could even put just a tiny little bit of it on that edge just so that I can see the difference between the two. On this video, it looks like it's a little bit too much of a there's too much of a line here, so I'm actually going to take an X-Acto or a palette knife, and a palette knife is actually the more recommended for what we're doing because we could accidentally cut the paper, which would make the paper not work very well after a while. And I'm just getting some of the excess. There's like these little, sort of like when you have a sweater and it's an older sweater, there's like pilings. There's a bunch of different things on this pastel that you can see that are just from me using it. It's like making like a bunch of refuse on the side that I want to get rid of. So I don't want that on my drawing. I'm going to actually wipe that away. As I see I'm working here, I'm going to take a little bit more of this black and go along the edge of this wall and make it just a little bit thicker up in here, because what's happening is the wall, again, should be darker than my floor. So what I want to do is I'm going to take that same pinky purple that I started with before, and I'm just going to get a bunch of it on my floor here. And then technically a reflection is going to show the same colors, and it's going to be almost exactly the same as what you're seeing, but it's going to be a little bit squiggly, and it's actually going to be like just a hair darker than the original colors that you were using. And I can see over here I made a little bit of a mistake with my oil pastel. I have to erase a little bit of that black that I added there because that line isn't very nice. So I'm going to go back in here and scrape that off. Once I get that off, I'm going to go back in with that pink purple color that I was using and go back over the top, and it should be pretty much fine the way that it is. So then I'm going to go in here and I'm actually going to take some purple. And you can see, here's what I was talking about. I'm actually going to kind of just leave this the pinky purple that it is. I'm not even going to add any white to that area right now. I'm going to then take the darker purple that I had, and I'm going to put a little bit more of this darker purple into the floor, because again, it should reflect almost the same. And since I've got that wall so dark right here, I'm actually going to put some of the black in here, and then I'm probably going to take some of the black off of the wall, because as I was working here, I sort of forgot about the reflections as I was working, and I'm going to have to go back in here and I'm going to have to highlight the wall, because technically that reflection is a little bit darker. I can actually use my finger and rub the oil pastels, but the oil pastels again actually work a little bit better if you blend them into each other. And I'm going to go a little bit different direction than I went on the wall surface, just so that I can actually see what I'm doing. Because I can't see enough contrast right now between the floor and the wall. So I'm going to turn my paper so that I can work on it, and I'm actually going to scrape just a little bit of the black off of that wall, and I'm going to have some work to do to try to make it look a little bit more natural, but I need to get this off so that I can, oops, right there it didn't want to come off, and then I just changed the angle of my palette knife, and it took it off a little bit more. So then I'm going to scrape a little bit more into here, and I may have gone a little too hard, but we can always add a little bit more purple, black, and that pinky purple back in there to actually make that look like what it's supposed to. So if I go in here, I'm not entirely happy with how this part looks, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my finger and I'm going to see if I can rub into here a little bit, and maybe that will actually make that part a little bit nicer than what I saw just before. I'm going to take then the purple and I'm going to put some purple into here, because again, I just want this area to be a little bit lighter than what the floor is. So now I can see my floor is darker than my wall, and I still have a darkness to a lightness over on the left hand side. It moves from dark on the right to light on the left, and then I've got at least, a good third of my drawing done, and it only took about 5-10 minutes.